Good morning. We are in Matthew chapter 6. We've made it through the first chapter of the Sermon on the Mount, and we are now progressing forward into a new section, you might say. As far as I know, we're done with the "you've been heard it's been said to those of old, but I say unto yous." That was a big part of the first chapter, was kind of blowing away the conceptions of the people that have been set up by the religious leaders of their time. And now we're going to get in to really some just models of just how we are to live. Let's start with verse 1. Take heed that you do not do your charitable deeds before men to be seen by them. Otherwise, you have no reward from your Father in heaven. Therefore, when you do a charitable deed, do not sound a trumpet before you as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and in the streets, that they may have glory from men. Assuredly, I say to you, they have their reward. But when you do a charitable deed, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, that your charitable deed may be in secret, and your Father who sees in secret will himself reward you openly. So, I think it's kind of a straightforward thing, but it's first off, it's charitable deeds, right? Now, the idea here is most often tied into giving, financial giving, but I think that you could probably count the alms and whatnot to be more than that. And notice the first thing is that take heed that you do not do your charitable deeds before men to be seen. It's not going to be possible to never be seen when giving or when serving. You might get caught from time to time. But that's not the problem here. The problem here isn't if you're seen or if you're not seen. It's simply a matter of, are you doing it to be seen? Now, there can be advantages and disadvantages, for every different method and whatnot. But at our church, this was one of the main reasons why we moved to the box in the back. We've got a box, and it's in the back of the church, well, front of the church. I guess it depends what you call it. It's the opposite side of the pulpit, as far from the pulpit as one can get. It's right by the front door, and it makes it so that as you walk by, you can put your money in right there. You can do it before the service or after the service or during the service. It's put in a place so that you can give in such a way that it's not really obvious that you're giving. Other ways of giving, you got passing the plate or the sack or whatever that may be. And, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. In fact, I have a friend who has a church and he passes, I don't know if it's a bag or a plate or whatnot, but, he points out that they take up a collection. It mentions in 1 Corinthians 16, 1 Corinthians 16. And he says, yeah, that's biblical too. It's not like there's just one way to do anything, but you take up a collection. The one that makes the least sense to me, and I've sat through church services at other churches I've visited where this was the case, where they had like the money pot, which was open, so you could see what people were putting in it. And it was at the front of the church, and you had to walk to the front of the church to put your offering in. And that was just kind of weird for me. That seems almost as far from this as you can get. You can pass a plate or a sack and be kind of discreet. Yeah, your neighbor might look over, but it's a different thing when you got to walk up to the front of the church and lay down the money in the thing. And once again, if that's the way a church does it, I'm not going to get bent out of shape over it. But I'm pretty adamant I would never do that. Because again, it's not to be seen. It's something that we are to keep as secret. Now, Again, this Sermon on the Mount is thick with hyperbole. When Jesus says, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, I wouldn't do tithe roulette where you write a check and you just kind of, I'm going to throw numbers down. I'm not even going to think about it. It's going to get hard to get the number box to match with the word box if you do it that way. I'm going to reach into my purse and whatever I grab, I grab. That's not literal, right? But he's trying to paint a picture with hyperbole, and he uses a lot of hyperbole in here. And he mentions for the people who want to be seen, they want people to see their great acts, their great deeds, what they've done for God. Well, they'll get their reward. They'll get a bunch of people thinking that they're super spiritual and super, what's the word for giving I'm looking for? But they're generous. There's the word I wanted. And others will give in secret, and they'll get their reward too. God will reward them. When it says he will reward you openly, right? Now, openly does not necessarily mean on earth. I'm just saying it's not in the text. Maybe you won't be rewarded openly on earth. Yeah, it's true. I mean, God will pour out blessings upon those who give faithfully. But it doesn't necessarily mean that God's going to bless you on earth with all sorts of earthly blessings. The widow with the 2 mites was rewarded openly by Jesus. And she went to heaven and she's like, where's my reward? And he's like, it's all gone. I put you in the Bible. You don't get anything up here now. I'm just joking. But the main idea is, what's the heart behind giving? Now, I might as well just flip to all the great chapters, and we'll try and make it as fast as possible. Many of us know Malachi, and I won't even actually flip to Malachi. But, Malachi says, when people have not been giving. Okay, I'm going to flip to Malachi, because it's important for us as Christians to know all this stuff. All right, now, in Malachi chapter 3, God says to the priests and to the people, will a man rob God? And yet you have robbed me. But you say, in what way have we robbed you? In tithes and offerings. I'm not even going to get the part where he says for you to test him to see if he will not bless you for giving. But just right there, it's just a reminder. Not giving according to what we're going to look at in the New Testament, it's robbery. Yeah, like God says it, right? I mean, Malachi 3:8, you look it up on your own, right? You have robbed me. In what way have we robbed you? In tithes and offerings. Please note too, it says in verse 10, bring all the tithes into the storehouse that there may be food in my house. I want to throw out a principle to you that I think is still a New Testament principle, which is that you should be giving to your church. You should have a church, a local church, one that's with a pastor, like in your town. If you don't have that, start one. But you should be tithing to the local church. I'm going to challenge that. Some people feel like, well, I'm going to give, some of my tithes to the church and some of my tithes over here and some of my tithes. That's not a tithe then. The idea is that you entrust it to God, and you do it through the leaders of your local church. When you say, I want to give half here and half to my charity of choice, what you're actually doing is you're not letting go, and you want to control where your money goes. And if that charity is so upon your heart, why not give your regular tithe to your church and then give additional to that charity? Wait, what? I can't just take some out of my normal tithe? Yeah, because that would hurt, wouldn't it? Giving up more of your money. But if you really want to help the charity, maybe you should count the cost. Now, I'm not a big pusher, on gotta give, gotta bless, God's gonna bless you, and blah, blah, blah. But I believe in biblical concepts, and giving is a biblical concept. It's manipulated, it's twisted by so many false teachers, but it's also something that we can't ignore. So here's the 2 other chapters, guys. If you want to understand New Testament giving, 1 Corinthians 16. We covered this just recently at our church at night, but wasn't there for the morning crowd. Paul gives concerning the collection for the saints. We talked about the collection, right? Verse 2, 1 Corinthians 16:2 gives us three really important principles for every Christian. It says, on the first day of the week, let each of you lay something aside, storing up as he may prosper, that there be no collections when I come. So here's where we have some of my policies or rules or guidelines for giving. On the first day of the week, it was planned and periodic. Planned and periodic. You should give, and you should plan it, not like a whenever, it's convenient. And it should be periodic. It should be something that is done in a regular. I don't care if you give once a week, you give twice a month, every paycheck once a month. But is it planned and is it periodic? I plan to give every whatever. You could give once a year if that's your plan and you keep that periodic pattern going. He says, storing up as he may prosper. Giving should be proportional. Now, 10%, the old-fashioned tithe, that's proportional. It works. But 10% is not a rule that Christians are bound to. Charles Spurgeon once said, heaven forbid we would ever put the tithe upon the Christian. We should never limit ourselves to so little as 10%. He gets you with a curveball there. You think it's going one way and then it goes the other. But there's the point, though, is that it should be proportional. And yeah, if you're making 6 digits, maybe you could handle 11%. I'm just saying, it's that idea. It's that, and maybe if you're just dirt broke, then maybe 10% is hard. And you should pray about that. And that's another thing. And prayer actually comes up in a little bit. But that there be no collections when I come. That's private. And we've already talked about the private part. I think I explained that clearly. But again, the idea of proportional. Let's tie that in now with 2 Corinthians. 2 Corinthians 9, I believe. Flipping. Okay, 2 Corinthians 9. I'll give a little head start in verse 6. He who sows sparingly will also reap sparingly. He who sows bountifully will reap bountifully. So let each one give as he purposes in his heart, not grudgingly or of necessity, for God loves a cheerful giver. So first off, give bountifully. Here's a thought. As Christians, if I was going to give a gift to another Christian, when the opportunity comes up because there's a family in need in the church, when I look back on my giving to God through the church and in other ways on top of my giving through the church, I would hope you could say, I gave bountifully. I was a generous person. Can we say that? We ought to be able to. I'm not talking about what the dollar amount is. I'm not talking about all those things. All I'm saying, though, is that in our hearts as Christians, we ought to be able to say, I was generous. Now, as he purposes in his heart, we should give prayerfully. See, there's part of this whole thing is, how much ought I give? Pray about it. I think some people think 10% is an easy number, and so they just do it. As long as I'm giving 10%, I'm okay. That might not be the case. That's the whole thing with the Sermon on the Mount, actually, is Jesus is kind of showing how these rules that people think they can follow and they're okay as long as they say, no, he's trying to break the paradigm and make people realize that God wants more than just check the box, I'm okay. And so simply put, have you recently prayed about what you give to your church? Remember, there's a lot of people who watch this that aren't from my church. It's not like a personal plea here. But have you been praying about it? And maybe God just tells you, you need to give 15%. Why? Well, maybe because you've paid off your house, your kids are out of the house, and you still have a healthy income. And maybe when you stand before God, you would rather say, I became a double tither rather than I had one extra trip to Hawaii. It's just stuff like that. I want to say I was generous. And so if you pray about it and God says give 5% because you guys are hurting and I'll be okay. If God lays that on your heart, I trust you. If you really pray about it and God speaks about a number that's less than 10%, again, I don't think it's a rule. It's a great guideline and it's very helpful. 10% is a good helpful. And I like Dave Ramsey's comment on this where he says, if you can't live off 90% of your income, you can't live off 100% of your income. And I think that statement is almost always true. I mean, we're talking someone who's in the like low poverty, hitting hard times. That might change a little bit. But it's kind of true. If you can't use your money wisely enough to live off 90, then you probably can't be wise enough to live off 100. You should just get some budgeting skills. All right, last couple things. Not grudgingly and cheerfully. Giving freely and cheerfully. If you can't give with a good heart, then just don't. God's not going broke anytime soon. From what I hear, he has a cattle on 1,000 hills and beef prices are up. And so God's not broke. He's not dependent on your tithe. And if you ever hear a minister say, you need to give or we're going to be shut down, let them get shut down. Okay? I'm just saying. I've heard, the televangelist or something like that. We need people to give or, God's going to, don't worry about that. God will take care of his church. But give planned and periodically. Make a plan about what you and your family will do and stick with it. Pray about that plan. Pray about the proportion that you're giving proportionally to your income. And if God keeps blessing your family, well, pray about giving more so that at the end of your life, you can say, I was a generous and cheerful giver. That is an accolade we all should go with. Backing up to our Sermon on the Mount, your charitable deeds. No one should really know about what you're giving. No one needs to know. In fact, it actually stumbles me sometimes when people give. Oftentimes, sometimes I feel like they're actually being kind of flippant and not acting like giving's a big deal. And it's like, it actually is a really big deal. And I don't want to be accused of robbing God. And so, treat it as a big deal, but it's your big deal between you and him. No one else needs to know. I don't have a clue who gives what at my church. I'm in the dark. I might offend our biggest giver and send them off one day and be none the wiser. And that's okay. That's the way I want it. I don't ever want that kind of stuff to influence me. So, that your charitable deeds may be in secret, and your Father who sees in secret will himself reward you openly. If you're not rewarded in this life, you better believe it, you're going to be rewarded in the next. Be faithful, church. Pray, give. Hilarious is that word, cheerful. It's the hilarios. I'm pretty sure that's what it is in the Greek. It's where we get our word hilarious from. You should laugh your way to the tithe box or to the plate or whatever your church does. I hope that was educational and maybe helpful, maybe inspiring, maybe convicting. And if so, that's good. That's good. It's good to be convicted and have God be pushing us. So God bless you guys. I will see you guys around tomorrow morning at 7:30. See you then.